A young Japanese soldier learns English in secret, turning it into a weapon to expose betrayal and rebuild peace after World War II. But will his courage cost him everything? Chapter 1. The Shadow of the Rising Sun. In the mountains of Japan, a young soldier named Hiroshi prepares for war. Can he overcome brutal trials and his own fears? Hiroshi stood at the edge of the training camp, his breath visible in the cold morning air. The mountains loomed like silent guardians, their peaks shrouded in mist. He tightened the strap of his rifle, feeling its weight press against his shoulder. At just 19, Hiroshi had never imagined he would leave his family's farm. But the war had changed everything. The training was relentless. Each day began before sunrise with grueling marches through rocky terrain. The instructors shouted commands, their voices sharp and unyielding. Hiroshi's body ached, but he pushed forward, driven by a quiet determination. He had always been the smallest in his village, but he carried a fire within him. One evening, as the recruits rested in their barracks, Hiroshi noticed a book lying on a wooden bench. Its cover read Graded Reader Level 2. Curious, he picked it up and flipped through its pages. The words were foreign, but the illustrations told stories of distant lands. Hiroshi felt a spark of curiosity. That night, while his comrades slept, Hiroshi sat by the dim light of a lantern. He whispered the English phrases aloud, mimicking the sounds as best he could. Shadowing English speaking practice, he repeated, his voice barely audible. The words felt strange on his tongue, but he persisted. Days turned into weeks, and Hiroshi's secret practice became a routine. He would steal moments during breaks, reciting phrases from the book. His fellow recruits mocked him. Why waste time on the enemy's language, they sneered. But Hiroshi ignored them. Something deep inside told him this knowledge would matter. One afternoon, during a survival exercise, Hiroshi found himself separated from his unit. The dense forest seemed endless, and the silence was unnerving. As he navigated the terrain, he stumbled upon a small clearing. There, he saw an older officer sitting on a rock, sharpening a knife. The officer looked up, his eyes piercing. "You're the one who's been practicing English," he said. Hiroshi froze, unsure how to respond. The officer stood and walked closer. "Do you know why I left that book?" he asked. Hiroshi shook his head, his heart pounding. The officer leaned in, his voice low. "Because I see something in you. A spark. This war will test you in ways you cannot imagine. But remember, knowledge is a weapon too." Before Hiroshi could reply, the officer turned and disappeared into the trees. The encounter left him unsettled, but more determined than ever. He continued his training with renewed focus, the officer's words echoing in his mind. As the weeks passed, Hiroshi's skills improved. He could now understand simple English sentences and even hold basic conversations. His comrades still mocked him, but he no longer cared. He had a purpose. The final test came on a stormy night. The recruits were ordered to navigate a treacherous mountain path in complete darkness. Hiroshi led his team, using his instincts and the faint light of the moon. When they reached the summit, the instructors were waiting. "You've done well," one of them said. "But remember, the real test is yet to come." Hiroshi looked out at the horizon, where the first light of dawn was breaking. He thought of his family, his village, and the book that had started it all. He didn't know what the future held, but he was ready to face it. As Hiroshi descended the mountain, he noticed the mysterious officer watching him from a distance. The man nodded, a hint of a smile on his lips. Chapter 2: Echoes of War. War erupts in the Pacific, and Hiroshi is sent to the front lines. Can his secret knowledge of English save lives? The sound of artillery fire echoed across the island, shaking the ground beneath Hiroshi's feet. He crouched low in the trench, his rifle clutched tightly. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid smell of gunpowder. Around him, soldiers shouted orders, their voices strained with urgency. Hiroshi's unit had been deployed to a strategic island in the Pacific. The Allies were advancing, and the Japanese forces were determined to hold their ground. Hiroshi's training had prepared him for combat, but nothing could have prepared him for the chaos of war. As night fell, the battlefield grew eerily quiet. Hiroshi sat in the trench, staring at the stars. He thought of the book he had left behind, graded reader level 2, and the phrases he had practiced. Shadowing English speaking practice, he whispered to himself, finding comfort in the familiar words. The next morning, Hiroshi was assigned to a reconnaissance mission. His task was to scout the enemy's position and report back. Moving silently through the dense jungle, he relied on his instincts. The forest was alive with sounds, birds chirping, leaves rustling, and distant footsteps. Suddenly, Hiroshi froze. He heard voices speaking in English. Peering through the foliage, he saw a group of Allied soldiers discussing their plans. Thanks to his practice with English story for listening, Hiroshi understood their conversation. They were planning an ambush on his unit's position. Heart racing, Hiroshi retreated and raced back to the trench. He relayed the information to his commanding officer, who quickly adjusted their defenses. When the attack came, Hiroshi's unit was ready. The ambush failed, and the Allies were forced to retreat. After the battle, Hiroshi was praised for his quick thinking. His comrades, who had once mocked him, now looked at him with respect. But Hiroshi felt no pride, only relief. He had saved lives, but the cost of war weighed heavily on him. Days later, while patrolling the battlefield, Hiroshi stumbled upon a makeshift camp. It was empty, but he noticed a small notebook lying on the ground. Curious, he picked it up and flipped through its pages. It was a diary, written in English by an Allied prisoner of war. The entries spoke of hardship, hope, and a mysterious betrayal. The prisoner mentioned a traitor within the Japanese ranks, someone feeding information to the Allies. Hiroshi's hands trembled as he read the final entry. If this diary is found, know the truth lies in the code. Hiroshi hid the diary in his uniform, his mind racing. Could there really be a traitor among them? He thought of the mysterious officer who had encouraged his English studies. Was there a connection? That night, Hiroshi lay awake, staring at the stars. The diary's words haunted him. He knew he had to uncover the truth, but doing so would put him in danger. The war was no longer just about survival, it was about loyalty and justice. As Hiroshi drifted into a restless sleep, he heard footsteps nearby. Opening his eyes, he saw a shadowy figure watching him. Before he could react, the figure disappeared into the night. Chapter 3: The Silent Interpreter. In the post-war era, Hiroshi becomes a bridge between enemies. But can words truly heal the wounds of war? The war had ended, but the scars remained. Hiroshi stood in the ruins of a village, its buildings reduced to rubble. The air was heavy with the scent of ash and despair. Japan was defeated, and the Allies now occupied the land. Hiroshi, no longer a soldier, was assigned to a peacekeeping mission. His task was to mediate between the occupying forces and the local population. It was a delicate role, requiring patience and understanding. Hiroshi's knowledge of English, once a secret, now became his greatest asset. He practiced daily, repeating phrases from shadowing English speaking practice to maintain his fluency. One morning, Hiroshi was called to a meeting in the village square. A group of Allied soldiers had accused a local farmer of stealing supplies. The farmer, an elderly man, denied the charges but spoke no English. The soldiers grew impatient, their voices rising in anger. Hiroshi stepped forward, his heart pounding. "Please let me help," he said in English. The soldiers turned to him, surprised. Hiroshi translated the farmer's words, explaining that the supplies had been misplaced, not stolen. After a tense discussion, the soldiers agreed to drop the charges. The villagers watched in silence, their expressions a mix of gratitude and suspicion. Hiroshi felt their eyes on him, questioning his loyalty. Was he still one of them, or had he become a tool of the occupiers? Days later, Hiroshi was approached by an Allied officer named Captain Harris. "You have a gift," Harris said. "Your English is impressive. We need people like you to rebuild trust." Hiroshi nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. He couldn't forget the diary he had found during the war. Its mention of a traitor still haunted him. He wondered if Captain Harris knew more than he let on. One evening, Hiroshi was invited to a gathering at the Allied headquarters. The room was filled with officers and local leaders, their conversations a blend of English and Japanese. Hiroshi moved through the crowd, listening intently. As he passed a group of officers, he overheard a cryptic conversation. "The code must be deciphered soon," one of them said. "The traitor's identity is crucial." Hiroshi's breath caught. Was this connected to the diary? Before he could learn more, Captain Harris approached him. "Hiroshi, I have a task for you," he said. "We've intercepted a coded message. We need someone fluent in both languages to help decode it." Hiroshi agreed, his mind racing. This could be his chance to uncover the truth. He spent hours studying the message, using his knowledge of English and Japanese. The symbols were complex, but he noticed patterns reminiscent of the diary's code. As he worked, Hiroshi felt a growing sense of unease. Decoding the message could expose the traitor, but it could also put him in danger. He thought of the shadowy figure he had seen during the war. Were they watching him now? Late that night, Hiroshi finally cracked the code. The message revealed a name, Lieutenant General Takahashi. Hiroshi recognized the name immediately. Takahashi was a high-ranking officer, now working on Japan's reconstruction. Hiroshi's hands trembled as he realized the implications. If Takahashi was the traitor, exposing him could destabilize the fragile peace. But keeping the secret would mean betraying his own principles. As Hiroshi prepared to report his findings, he heard footsteps outside his door. He froze, his heart pounding. Was someone coming to silence him? Chapter 4. The Traitor's Shad. Hiroshi uncovers the traitor's identity, but exposing him could cost everything. Will he risk it all for justice? The footsteps outside Hiroshi's door grew louder, then stopped. He held his breath, clutching the decoded message tightly. The room was silent except for the sound of his heartbeat. After what felt like an eternity, the footsteps retreated. Hiroshi exhaled, his mind racing. He knew he couldn't stay here. The decoded message implicated Lieutenant General Takahashi, a man of great influence. If Hiroshi revealed the truth, he would be challenging a powerful figure. But if he stayed silent, the traitor's actions could undermine Japan's fragile recovery. Hiroshi packed the message and the diary into a small bag. He slipped out of the building under the cover of darkness. The streets were empty, the moon casting long shadows. He moved quickly, his senses alert. Every sound made him flinch: a stray cat, the rustle of leaves, the distant hum of a jeep. He needed to find Captain Harris. The Allied officer had trusted him with a coded message, but Hiroshi wasn't sure if he could trust Harris in return. Still, he had no other options. The weight of the secret pressed heavily on him. As he approached the Allied headquarters, Hiroshi noticed a figure standing in the shadows. It was the mysterious officer from his training days. The man stepped into the light, his expression unreadable. "You've come far, Hiroshi," he said. "But this path is dangerous." Hiroshi hesitated. "Who are you? Why did you leave that book for me?" The officer smiled faintly. "Because I saw potential in you. Knowledge is power, but it also comes with risks. Be careful who you trust." Before Hiroshi could respond, the officer disappeared into the night. His words lingered, adding to Hiroshi's unease. Was he warning him about Captain Harris? Or someone else? Hiroshi entered the headquarters and found Captain Harris in his office. The room was dimly lit, maps and documents scattered across the desk. Harris looked up, surprised. "Hiroshi? What are you doing here at this hour?" "I decoded the message," Hiroshi said, placing the paper on the desk. "It names Lieutenant General Takahashi as the traitor." Harris studied the message, his face grim. "This is serious. Takahashi is a key figure in Japan's reconstruction. Exposing him could cause chaos." Hiroshi nodded. "But if we don't act, his betrayal could harm both sides." Harris leaned back in his chair, deep in thought. "You're right. But we need proof beyond this message. Can you get closer to Takahashi? Gather more evidence." Hiroshi agreed, though the task filled him with dread. He spent the next few days observing Takahashi from a distance. The general was always surrounded by aides and guards, making it nearly impossible to approach him. One evening, Hiroshi noticed Takahashi meeting with a group of foreign officials. They spoke in hushed tones, their body language tense. Hiroshi used his English skills to eavesdrop, catching fragments of their conversation. "The plan is in motion," Takahashi said. "Once the funds are transferred, the reconstruction will be under our control." Hiroshi's blood ran cold. Takahashi wasn't just a traitor, he was orchestrating a scheme to exploit Japan's recovery. Hiroshi needed to act fast. He returned to Captain Harris with the new information. "We have to stop him," Hiroshi insisted. "Before it's too late." Harris agreed, but warned Hiroshi of the risks. "Takahashi has powerful allies. If we move against him, we must be prepared for the consequences." As Hiroshi left the headquarters, he felt a pair of eyes watching him. He turned, but the street was empty. The shadow of the traitor loomed closer than ever. Chapter 5: The Last Word. In the final confrontation, Hiroshi faces the traitor. Will his words bring justice or chaos? The day of reckoning had arrived. Hiroshi stood in the crowded hall of the Reconstruction Council, his heart pounding. Lieutenant General Takahashi was addressing the assembly, his voice confident and commanding. The room was filled with officials, both Japanese and Allied, all listening intently. Hiroshi clutched the decoded message and the diary, his evidence against Takahashi. Captain Harris had arranged for him to speak, but the risk was immense. Exposing Takahashi in public could ignite a political firestorm. Yet, staying silent would mean betraying his country. As Takahashi finished his speech, Hiroshi stepped forward. "I have something to say," he announced, his voice steady. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to him. Takahashi frowned. "Who are you to interrupt this assembly?" Hiroshi ignored him, addressing the crowd. "I have proof of a betrayal that threatens our nation's future." He held up the documents, his hands trembling but resolute. The room erupted in murmurs. Takahashi's face turned pale, but he quickly composed himself. "This is nonsense," he declared. "A desperate attempt to slander me." Hiroshi pressed on, recounting what he had discovered. He spoke of the coded message, the diary, and Takahashi's secret meetings. The room listened in stunned silence. Even Captain Harris, standing at the back, looked impressed by Hiroshi's courage. Takahashi tried to interrupt, but Hiroshi's words were too powerful. "You betrayed your own people for personal gain," Hiroshi said, his voice rising. "Your actions have endangered our recovery and our honor." The assembly erupted into chaos. Some officials demanded Takahashi's arrest, while others defended him. Amid the uproar, Takahashi lunged at Hiroshi, his composure shattered. "You insolent fool!" he shouted. Before Takahashi could reach him, guards intervened, restraining the disgraced general. Hiroshi stood firm, his chest heaving. He had done it, he had exposed the truth. As Takahashi was led away, Captain Harris approached Hiroshi. "You've done a brave thing today," he said. "But this is only the beginning. Rebuilding trust will take time." Hiroshi nodded, feeling a mix of relief and exhaustion. He had risked everything, but justice had been served. The shadow of the traitor was finally lifted. In the weeks that followed, Hiroshi became a symbol of hope. His actions inspired others to speak out against corruption. He continued his work as an interpreter, bridging the gap between former enemies. One evening, as Hiroshi walked through the rebuilt village, he noticed a familiar figure in the distance. It was the mysterious officer from his training days. The man approached, his expression softer than before. "You fulfilled your destiny," the officer said. "Your courage has changed the course of history." Hiroshi smiled faintly. "I only did what I thought was right." The officer nodded. "Sometimes that's all it takes." With that, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the twilight. As Hiroshi watched him go, he felt a sense of closure. The journey had been long and painful, but he had found his purpose. If Hiroshi's journey inspired you, leave a comment below. What did you think of the epic conclusion? Subscribe, hit the like button, and ring the bell for more stories of courage and redemption. Thank you for joining us on this unforgettable adventure. Reading Comprehension Exercises. 1. Multiple choice questions. A. Why did Hiroshi start learning English in secret? I. To impress his comrades. 2. Because he believed it would be useful. 3. To escape the war. 4. To become a teacher. B. What did Hiroshi find during the war that hinted at betrayal? I. A weapon. 2. A diary written by an Allied prisoner. 3. A map. 4. A coded radio message. C. How did Hiroshi use his English skills after the war? I. To teach children. 2. To mediate between Allied forces and locals. 3. To write a book. 4. To become a spy. Preposition practice. Fill in the blanks with the correct prepositions. In, on, at, by with for, from, to. 1. Hiroshi found a book _ the training camp. 2. He practiced English _ the light of a lantern. 3. The diary was written _ an Allied prisoner. 4. Hiroshi overheard enemy soldiers talking _ English. 5. He hid the diary _ his uniform. 6. Captain Harris entrusted Hiroshi _ a coded message. 7. The traitor's name was revealed _ the decoded message. 8. Hiroshi stood _ the crowd, ready to expose the truth. Verb tense practice. Rewrite the sentences using the correct verb tense: past simple, past continuous, present perfect, or future simple. 1. Hiroshi, learn English in secret during his training. Hiroshi _ English in secret during his training. 2. He find a diary while patrol the battlefield. He _ a diary while _ the battlefield. 3. By the end of the war, Hiroshi become a skilled interpreter. By the end of the war, Hiroshi _ a skilled interpreter. 4. If Hiroshi expose the traitor, it cause chaos. If Hiroshi _ the traitor, it _ chaos. Vocabulary in context. Match the words to their meanings based on the story. 1. Betrayal. 2. Mediate. 3. Decipher. 4. Reconstruction. 5. Resilience. A. To act as a neutral party to resolve conflicts. B. The act of rebuilding something after destruction. C. The act of being disloyal to someone's trust. D. The ability to recover quickly from difficulties. E. To convert a coded message into understandable language. Discussion questions. 1. How did Hiroshi's knowledge of English change his life? 2. Do you think Hiroshi made the right choice by exposing Takahashi? Why or why not? 3. What does this story teach us about the power of language and education? These exercises are designed to reinforce grammar, vocabulary, and comprehension skills while engaging with the themes and events of Hiroshi's story. Write in English in another module the answers to each point. Answers to exercises. Reading comprehension answers. 1. Multiple choice questions. A. Why did Hiroshi start learning English in secret? Answer 2. Because he believed it would be useful. B. What did Hiroshi find during the war that hinted at betrayal? Answer 2. A diary written by an Allied prisoner. C. How did Hiroshi use his English skills after the war? Answer 2. To mediate between Allied forces and locals. Preposition practice answers. Fill in the blanks with the correct prepositions. 1. Hiroshi found a book in the training camp. 2. He practiced English by the light of a lantern. 3. The diary was written by an Allied prisoner. 4. Hiroshi overheard enemy soldiers talking in English. 5. He hid the diary in his uniform. 6. Captain Harris entrusted Hiroshi with a coded message. 7. The traitor's name was revealed in the decoded message. 8. Hiroshi stood in the crowd, ready to expose the truth. Verb tense practice answers. Rewrite the sentences using the correct verb tense. 1. Hiroshi learned English in secret during his training. Hiroshi learned English in secret during his training. 2. He find a diary while patrol the battlefield. He found a diary while patrolling the battlefield. 3. By the end of the war, Hiroshi become a skilled interpreter. By the end of the war, Hiroshi had become a skilled interpreter. 4. If Hiroshi exposed the traitor, it cause chaos. If Hiroshi exposed the traitor, it would cause chaos. Vocabulary in context answers. Match the words to their meanings. 1. Betrayal, c. The act of being disloyal to someone's trust. 2. Mediate, a. To act as a neutral party to resolve conflicts. 3. Decipher, e. To convert a coded message into understandable language. 4. Reconstruction, b. The act of rebuilding something after destruction. 5. Resilience, d. The ability to recover quickly from difficulties. Discussion questions. Sample answers. 1. How did Hiroshi's knowledge of English change his life? Answer. Hiroshi's knowledge of English gave him a unique skill that saved lives during the war and helped rebuild trust afterward. It transformed him from a simple soldier to a bridge between cultures. 2. Do you think Hiroshi made the right choice by exposing Takahashi? Why or why not? Answer. Yes, Hiroshi made the right choice. Exposing Takahashi was necessary to protect Japan's future and uphold justice, even though it was risky. 3. What does this story teach us about the power of language and education? Answer. The story shows that language and education are powerful tools that can bridge divides, uncover truths, and create opportunities for peace and understanding. These answers provide clarity and reinforce learning, while connecting back to the story's themes and events. Join us for our next video, The Dictionary of Freedom, a powerful story of resilience and language. Discover how Minji's tattered dictionary became her lifeline and weapon. In the darkest moments, words can ignite hope. Don't miss this unforgettable journey.